I would like to talk about greens. There's a number of greens I've suggested for the 15 Flowers e-course, and I'd just like to go through some of the differences and how by adding some yellow or some magenta you can get a totally different colour, and you might be able to use a colour you've already got to get a similar colour to what I'll be using out of a bottle perhaps. Okay, so we'll just go through a few of those colours right now. Okay, the first one that was actually on the list for 15 Flowers is Chromium Green Oxide. So this isn't actually a golden colour. This is Italia brand, but it's really a grey green, but I find it useful and I'll show you why. So it's quite an opaque green colour. You see there, it's a grey green, opaque green. If I add a little bit of yellow to it, it lightens up very easily, becomes a lovely bit more green in there, light green. And if I add some magenta to it, Queen Magenta, only because that is one of my favourite colours and I like using colours I've already got. A bit more green in there. It'll mix to a dark green quite satisfactorily. If you keep adding red, it will go even more brown. Okay, so we'll compare these to a couple of the other colours that I used during the course and definitely in the course of my painting. This is Golden Green Gold. Now, love this colour. It's just not very translucent. Okay, it is a lovely, more natural colour. And I'll show you what I mean. There you go. Can you see that straight away? It's a very translucent colour. You can see that on the label here too, so it's certainly not unexpected. If I add some yellow to that, it gets even more yellow. If I add a little bit, I'm only a little bit because it's such a see-through colour, I know it'll go pink before it goes anything. Here we'll add a bit more green back in there. Okay, but still really see-through. And the Queen Magenta is a see-through colour, so it's to be expected. All right. Now we'll compare that with the Jo Sonja's Sap Green, which I use very often on my paint-alongs here in the studio. I find it a really good beginner's green. You can see it's more opaque, definitely got a lot more coverage than the green gold. I add some yellow to it, still get a nice bright light green, then adding a bit of Queen Magenta, it darkens really nicely as well. So it's definitely not as natural a colour as the green gold is, or even the green oxide is probably, but a very useful colour for beginners I've found. Okay, so we'll compare that to this brand, Matisse Flow. So Flow is their more fluid range. It's not as fluid or as runny as the Golden Fluid range. So here we go, it's got the same name, Australian Sap Green, as the Jo Sonja's brand, but just look at the difference in colour here. So this is the Matisse Sap Green, okay, and it's more expensive than the Jo Sonja's, and that's what you're paying for, more pigment. Okay, so that is quite a lovely colour. We'll add some yellow. It yellows up quite nicely. We'll add some red. We'll see how quickly it goes to brown. There we go. So you could work that if you keep going with the red, it'll go brown, but it also makes quite a nice dark green, although it's quite dark to start with. So that's probably one of the reasons I don't use it all the time, because I like it to be lighter to start with. Okay, but that's the Australian Sap Green in the Matisse Flow range. Now let's compare that to another Matisse paint. This is Australian Yellow Green in their Structure range. So these are a bunch of greens that I had in my stash that I bought over the years. You can see here on the palette, the structure is like, definitely like toothpaste. It's more like an oil paint. It holds its height really well. Okay, this is the runny golden paint. This is the out of the tube Flow, Matisse Flow, and this is the Structure. Okay, so this is similar to the golden heavy body out of the tube. All right, so here we have the Australian Yellow Green, similar to the Golden Fluid Green, but more yellow. Oops, no, I meant to leave that on there. If I add some yellow to that, It'll become even more yellow. Hardly any green there showing through at all. And then some red, oops, not too much there because we know it's quite a translucent colour anyway. So it goes to brown with red very quickly. Okay, still quite see-through. So in terms of a yellow-green, it's a nice one. Definitely brighter than the green gold. And that's because this one's made with yellow, an actual yellow colour, and this one's made with nickel azo gold as the yellow that's made that green go yellow. Okay, next one I want to try is Jenkins green. Now we do use this in the course and I use it quite often in my own work. So this is a dark green. Now this is very closely related to the green gold, except it uses bone black, which is a very brown sort of black, instead of yellow in the mix. So you can see that those two go together quite nicely and they're both golden colours. But it is a very nice, not too opaque, dark green. I'll add a bit of yellow to that. I need a bit more yellow on my palette. It goes to a mid-green quite nicely. Then add a little bit of the magenta and it goes dark very quickly. So if you kept adding the magenta, you get a really nice, rich black or dark. Okay? So it goes even darker very quickly with the magenta there. But you can see that that is a lovely translucent, I don't know, that's a really good quality. I don't know how else to explain it. Dark green colour there. Now, in terms of dark greens, I just wanted to compare it to another one called Hooker's Green. This is the Matisse range as well. I've had this for quite a while. Let's see. Oop, there we go. Separated a bit there in the tube, which is a problem I don't have with the bottles and the fluids as well. Okay, so let's look at the Hooker's Green. So it's more opaque than the Jenkins Green above it, but similar. Let's add some yellow, lightens up quite nicely, add some red, darkens quite nicely. So I would say that the Matisse Hooker's Green is definitely a possible substitute for the golden Jenkins Green. And I also wanted to test this Jo Sonja's Pine Green. Actually, I've got a Jo Sonja's Hooker's Green here too. Let's just see if that's any different at all to the Matisse. Hardly anything left in this tube. There it is, a little. Last dregs. Okay, so we'll just put a little one in here. Okay, similar, but not as much coverage. And the Jo Sonja's Hooker's Green, I'm just putting it below there so we can know that that's the Jo Sonja's. Here it is with the yellow. Here it is with the red. So I'd just say, painting it here right now, I'd say the pigment load is not as high as the Matisse, but it would be an option. Just put the Jo Sonja's. Put a JS next to that. In there. Alright, now we'll compare that to the Jo Sonja's Pine Green. Didn't realise I had so many greens in my drawers. Okay, Jo Sonja's Pine Green. And this is almost similar to the Chromium Green Oxide, I'd say. Quite chalky, good coverage into the yellow. Very similar too to the Jenkins Green plus yellow. The Jenkins Green is definitely darker to start with because it's got more pigment in it. Now if I add a bit of red to it, back to the Pine Green, there you go, you get it quite actually a bit more red because it's still very similar. It browns up pretty quickly. There we go, alright. So that would be a fairly useful colour as well to get the lights out of, but I much prefer the Jenkins Green in terms of ending up with a painting that glows, I suppose, has clean colours. This is definitely a bit more chalky and not as clean as the golden brand, and that's called Jenkins Green. So I hope that's been interesting and has helped you choose what you'd like to have in your stash. I most regularly use the Chromium Green Oxide, the green gold, the sap green. These are nice to have. I think I prefer the fluidity, the Jenkins Green as well. The golden fluids are my choice because of the way I paint, but by all means, if you've got another colour there that tickles your fancy, at least you know what it's called now, and you can go out and substitute it when I'm using dark green or mid green or light green throughout my courses. Any of those would do the job, or the ones that you prefer are the ones that you should use. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed that. Welcome to the world of green.